Hogwarts. My four-dimensional trash bag. Chapter 61. The Quidditch pitch was mostly deserted at 8 in the morning. Lynn, clutching a pouch full of pebbles, sat on the highest stand, while Cho hovered on her broomstick about 10 meters in front of him. Watch out. 3 this time. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh tilde. The 3 pebbles, thrown by telekinesis, flew off in different directions. Cho narrowed her eyes slightly. After clearly seeing the pebbles' trajectory, she deftly adjusted her direction in the air by tilting the broomstick handle. Before the pebbles had even fallen halfway, Cho quickly snatched them into her palm. Let's add one more this time. All right. Cho, having warmed up, prepared herself again. This simple pebble catching exercise was quite suitable as a warm-up drill. However, as the number of pebbles increased, the difficulty of catching all of them also rose. The highest stand was about 50 feet, roughly 15 meters, from the ground. The pebbles would hit the ground in about 1.7 seconds. Accounting for the initial air time when they were thrown, catching all the pebbles in just over 2 seconds was not easy. When the number of pebbles increased to 6, Cho began to struggle. If the pebbles were thrown across a slightly wider area, she risked missing some. So this is where you two are. Harry's voice came from behind. Neville, Seamus, Hermione, and others were also climbing the stands with her. Lynn, are you helping Cho practice? Helping Cho get a feel for it. Catching the golden snitch is probably much harder than catching pebbles. But there's only one snitch. Cho, having flown for a while, was slightly tired. Rapid turning and sudden acceleration or deceleration were not comfortable. I think I can only catch 6 at most at one time. Any more and I get flustered. That's already amazing, Cho. I bet none of the Ravenclaw students trying out this time can fly as well as you. Harry cheered Cho on, but her eyes were fixed unblinkingly on the broomstick. Harry, do you want to try too? Cho naturally noticed where Harry was looking. Hee tilde. Harry scratched her head, then reached up and tied her hair into a high ponytail. In flying class, we can only fly low, it's not thrilling at all. Actually, I can fly very steadily now, especially since I practiced before. Harry had played with the bamboo copter frequently during the holidays, though only at night when no one was around. She was incredibly bold. The first time she used the bamboo copter to fly, she dared to compete with Hedwig and Sigurd to see who could fly higher. How about you give it a go, Harry? I need a rest anyway to recover my strength for the tryouts later. I've been waiting for you to say that. Harry joyfully took the broom Cho handed her, then lifted her chin toward Lynn. Quick, Lynn. I want to play this too. Starting with 3. No, 5. 3 is too easy. Harry, confidence practically overflowing, waved her hand. Bring it on. Then, take this. The small pebbles scattered like flower petals towards the fan-shaped area in front. Harry, who had instantly accelerated, didn't slow down at all. She shot forward, and after carving an arc through the air, all 5 pebbles were neatly snatched into her hand. Her movements were sharp and spirited. Well, it looks like I underestimated you. Harry, that was amazing. Cho watched wide-eyed. Her movements facing 5 pebbles hadn't been nearly as fluid. Although Harry wears glasses, her dynamic vision is excellent. It's probably a natural talent. Faster, faster, Lynn, hurry up. Harry, fully immersed in the game, shouted down at Lynn, you're not giving up already, are you? Feeling provoked, Lynn grabbed a handful of pebbles and weighed them. Then prepare to meet your end, Harry. The number of pebbles instantly increased to 8, and the fan-shaped area they were thrown into was much wider than before. But this barely troubled Harry, who was maneuvering flexibly through the sky. Sudden stops, tail slides, and accelerating turns without any stuttering, techniques that usually require hard practice, were executed by her with effortless grace. Although the broomstick beneath her was an old clean sweep model, it didn't affect her movements in the slightest. Flying the bamboo copter had allowed Harry to master various maneuvering techniques in the sky early on. Although this was only the second time she had touched a broom, this experience was quickly integrated. Everyone else in the stands was dumbfounded because Lynn was now continuously throwing pebbles, one after another. Sometimes, just as 3 or 5 pebbles were thrown ahead, he would change direction and throw a few more. The difficulty level was more than 1 grade higher than before, But even so, Harry was completely unfazed by the challenge. The vibrant figure in the Gryffindor robe soared and tumbled through the sky. During one rapid dive, she reached out and snatched a small pebble just before it hit the ground. Amidst a chorus of gasps, she pulled the broom up in a V shape, executed a tail slide drift, and landed steadily on the stands. Phew! Harry, her cheeks flushed, let out a sigh of relief. The intense flying had made her heart pound, and she was slightly breathless. I missed 4, but next time, I'm sure I can catch them all. She shook the pocket stuffed with pebbles, spilling them with a clatter back into Lynn's lap. Well, wasn't I amazing? Harry, puffing out her chest proudly, felt absolutely exhilarated. She truly enjoyed the feeling of flying high in the sky. Incredible. Absolutely brilliant. Harry was slightly confused upon hearing the praise, as the voice wasn't the familiar one of Lynn or her friends, but a loud, hearty, and somewhat excited male voice. Turning her head, she saw a tall, solidly built boy wearing a Gryffindor Quidditch uniform. His hair was slightly messy, and his eyes shone with a hint of fanaticism, not because Harry was pretty, but because of her spectacular flying just now. I'm Oliver Wood. I'm the captain of the Gryffindor team this year, and also the keeper. Wood extended his hand, his gaze intensely fixed on Harry. Join the Gryffindor team. We desperately need a seeker right now, the one who can bring us victory. But first, years. Before Hermione could finish her reminder, Wood interrupted her with a wave of his hand. It doesn't matter at all. I can go talk to Professor McGonagall right now. Age isn't the issue, talent is. You are the second most talented person I've met since starting Hogwarts, Harry, someone who was born to be the center of attention on the Quidditch pitch. Wood shook Harry's hand vigorously, his eyes filled with anticipation. Then, who was the first? Harry asked curiously. That was our former captain, Charlie Weasley. But because he went to Durmstrang to participate in the Triwizard Tournament, we unfortunately didn't win the championship last year. Gryffindor can't lose Charlie. Wood's voice dropped slightly. After taking on the heavy responsibility of captain, Wood was under immense pressure. He desperately wanted to prove himself and, at the same time, wanted to personally hold the Quidditch House Cup trophy before he graduated. Is Charlie that good? Harry asked, intrigued. Yes, he is. Absolutely. Charlie is brilliant. The twins' voices rang out from behind Wood. When mentioning their older brother, Fred and George's faces were filled with pride. Before he even graduated, he received invitations from several teams, including the Ballycastle Bats, a veteran powerhouse that has won the League Cup 27 times, in addition to the England national team. It's just a shame that Charlie thought riding dragons was more interesting than riding a broom, so he went to Romania to study dragons instead. Without Charlie, we lost our strongest seeker. Wood turned his gaze back to Harry. I swear, you can definitely take Charlie's place. We are absolutely determined to win the Quidditch championship this year. Ravenclaw hasn't planned on losing, Cho said, crossing her arms, sounding slightly competitive. But Harry, you really should try out. You fly very well. Although Harry joining the Gryffindor team would pose a significant threat to the other teams, Cho held no hard feelings about it. What happens on the pitch stays on the pitch. It didn't change the fact that she was Harry's good friend. Her friends around her also excitedly urged Harry to join. Hearing their encouragement, Harry nodded without hesitation. If Professor McGonagall allows it, I would really love to play. I'll go find Professor McGonagall right now. Wood said hurriedly. Fred, George, keep an eye on the tryouts later. We still have one reserve position this year. See if you can pick out anyone suitable. No problem. Leave it to us. The twins nodded in agreement. Professor McGonagall should be having breakfast. We just saw her. Harriet was selected for the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Professor McGonagall, who had been begged by Wood to go to the Quidditch pitch, immediately made the decision after witnessing Harriet's incredibly talented performance. Although Professor McGonagall rarely smiled, she was actually quite fanatical about Quidditch. She was a loyal fan of the Puddlemere United team, and she also cared deeply about her own house's Quidditch team. Chu's performance in the tryouts was also excellent, and she easily secured a spot on the Ravenclaw team. Compared to others who couldn't even fly steadily in the air, her performance was quite outstanding. With their shared hobby solidified, Lynn was naturally ignored by the two of them. Quidditch training was tough, but with a partner's company, it wasn't a big problem. Wood's care for Harriet was evident. For this, he even discussed with the Ravenclaw team captain, and the two teams trained together. Anyway, the official matches wouldn't start until the second half of the semester. These first few months of school were for training new players and gelling the team. Lynn's school life quickly returned to normal: classrooms, the Great Hall, the Room of Requirement, and the dormitory, a 4-point line. His busy life kept him from feeling bored at all. He had also devoured several of the books Ollivander had given him, and he would complete the prerequisite preparations for studying wandlore before Christmas. The accumulation of knowledge is essential. The more one knows, the more inspiration and ideas will arise when combining materials. However, September 25th was a day he needed to pay attention to. Happy birthday, Chu. Lynn went to the kitchens in advance, and the enthusiastic house elves took on the task of making a birthday cake for Chu. To be honest, Lynn had a good impression of these diligent house elves who served Hogwarts. In an empty classroom, Lynn, Harriet, along with their friends and Chu's best friend, gathered. The empty classroom had been decorated with magic in advance. Small floating candles hovered above, colorful ribbons flew and danced, and golden bells played the happy birthday song. A pull-string cracker exploded a shower of colorful paper, and a birthday crown hat popped out, which Lynn placed on her head. Thank you, everyone. Chu's happy smile overflowed from the corners of her mouth. This was her first birthday at Hogwarts. Last year, she had received birthday presents, but she hadn't blown out candles or shared cake with classmates and friends. For her, today was a very meaningful day. With a knocks, the lights in the empty classroom were extinguished, leaving only the candles on the cake lit. As the birthday song began, Chu closed her eyes, made a wish, and then blew out the candles. A silver cake knife sliced the birthday cake prepared by the house elves, and everyone present received a large piece, followed by the gift-giving segment. Among them, the most valuable was probably the brand new Nimbus 2000 that Harriet gave, and the Tatsil Tornadoes badge from Chu's best friend Marietta also made her very happy. Although most of the gifts weren't that valuable, the thought behind them was far more important than their monetary worth. Lynn, where's your gift? Why haven't you taken it out yet? Harriet chirped, a little white cream still on her nose. Of course I prepared a gift, but Chu, you have to be careful. Will there be some danger? No, it's just that it is a bit mischievous. Lynn took out a wrapped gift box from his 4-dimensional pocket. It looked a bit like a small birdcage. He had originally planned to give Chu a golden snitch, since she was going to be a seeker, and a golden snitch would be quite commemorative. But this little thing wasn't cheap, and Lynn had earned money from making potions earlier specifically to buy one. But recently, when he was looking for Mundungus to sell some things, he encountered a black market dealer in the Hogshead Inn. 9 out of 10 people in the Hogshead Inn were shady, but Lynn didn't have any moral GAPI. Moral GAPI means moral squeamishness or fastidiousness. He didn't mind dealing with these lowlifes, and was even quite happy to do so. After receiving Lynn's gift, Chu carefully placed it on the table, then untied the ribbon and opened the package. First to catch her eye was a small silver cage, and inside this exquisite cage was a tiny golden bird, no bigger than a walnut. It was fluffy, looked like a golden dumpling, and had a pair of adorable ruby eyes, which were slightly squinted at the moment, cautiously watching Chu, who had opened the package. It's a golden snidget. Is it? Chu covered her mouth, her eyes full of surprise. Yes, a golden snidget, the prototype of the golden snitch. However, it was overhunted and is now protected, banned from Quidditch matches, and listed in the 4X-rated directory of protected magical creatures. But this was recorded in the 14th century. I consulted Professor Dumbledore a few days ago and wrote to Mr. Newt Scamander, who told me that the golden snidget population has recovered very well. Although it is still banned from Quidditch matches, it can be kept as a pet if registered with the Ministry of Magic. Under the cage is the Ministry of Magic registration certificate. I asked Professor McGonagall to help me get it. Really? You're giving this to me as a birthday present? Chu still looked at Lynn in disbelief. But how did you get it? Well, Lynn grinned, it's a secret, but the certificate is real, that's what matters. He couldn't very well tell Chu that after discovering someone was smuggling magical creatures at the Hog's Head Inn and had a batch of golden snidgets to sell, he staked out the Hog's Head Inn for 4 hours. The moment the guy came out, Lynn knocked him unconscious with a club and handed him over to Hagrid. Finally, the guy was treated as a poacher secretly entering the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid didn't say a word and gave him a kick, confiscated the little cuties he was carrying, and then the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures happily took him away, boosting their year-end performance. Lynn was also quite adept at black on black dealings, a term that refers to criminals preying on other criminals, as he had encountered many ill-intentioned individuals when he was homeless. Otherwise, where did his money come from? Although he possessed telekinesis, X-ray vision, and teleportation, Lynn wouldn't engage in stealing people's wallets. He still had some bottom lines. From now on, it's yours. The little one just hatched recently, and I've prepared its food, enough for you to raise it until it's grown. Do you like it? Of course. Chu gently hugged Lynn, then all her attention was drawn to the shiny little creature. The Celts believed that the souls of the dead returned to their homes, so they celebrated the new year every October 31st, considering it the moment when the boundary between life and death was thinnest. Halloween evolved from this tradition. At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, nestled in the Irish Highlands, the Halloween atmosphere was especially thick. Hagrid's massive pumpkins were ripe, some were so enormous they could serve as carriage bodies. Jack-o'-lanterns, carved into ghoulish faces, were visible everywhere in the castle, their gaping mouths filled with burning orange-red magical flames. Cloaked pumpkin heads lurked around corners. When an unsuspecting young wizard passed by, they would suddenly leap out to give them a fright, then let out a muffled burst of laughter amid the screams before twisting away and flying off. Although this was arguably the spookiest day at Hogwarts, the young wizards wore more smiles than usual. Gryffindor's morning charms lesson was a cheerful one. Professor Flitwick decided they could now learn the spell to make objects fly. Remember, it's swish and flick, and getting the pronunciation right is essential. Never forget Wizard Balufeo, who pronounced the F as an S, and found himself lying on the floor with a wild bull standing on his chest. Professor, which spell did Wizard Balufeo mispronounce? A curious student raised their hand and asked. For the sake of your safety, I won't tell you the example of that mistake. You should know, a bull weighs nearly 2,000 pounds and would crush your bones instantly. When learning magic, do not deliberately attempt dangerous experiments, especially now that you are just starting to grasp it. Professor Flitwick waved his hand. Now, practice freely. The classroom grew noisy. Everyone raised their wands, casting spells at the feathers before them. Compared to the minor spells they had learned in previous classes, the levitation charm was much more difficult than the Lumos charm. How are you feeling now, Lynn? Professor Flitwick was still quite attentive to Lynn. Although Lynn's charms ability lagged far behind his transfiguration skills, Professor Flitwick remained very kind to him. Maybe slightly better. But I don't think there's any fundamental difference. I still have a high degree of dullness when it comes to charms. Lynn shrugged helplessly. However, I can manage to grasp basic minor spells through long periods of practice, I just don't use them well. Wingardium Leviosa. Lynn flicked his wand, and the feather in front of him gently rose, hovering about a foot above the desk. It's limited to lighter objects, probably no more than 100 pounds. It took me nearly a week of practice during the holidays just to achieve this. I believe this is probably the best I can do. It seems this issue is genuinely puzzling. Professor Flitwick scratched his head ruefully. The spells you cast are much weaker than standard spellcasting, yet you possess no less magical power than your peers. It's actually quite excellent. Professor McGonagall informed me that you are already able to use transfiguration on relatively large targets. Yes, such as turning a sofa into a wild bull, or a small elephant. I don't lack magical power, and the transfiguration lasts for a long time. If that is the case, then I have a small suggestion for you. If you truly find yourself weak in charms, you might shift your focus to rune magic. You can begin studying ancient runes now, and once you have mastered them, I can teach you the methods ancient wizards used to cast magic before charms became widely adopted. Rune magic is a completely different system from charms. It is more rigid, but it might be more suitable for you. You have trouble communicating with your magical power, and rune magic can circumvent that weakness. Like this. Professor Flitwick used his wand as a quill and wrote a series of magical characters on a piece of parchment. Then, the tip of his wand touched the paper, a blue magical flame flashed and vanished, the runes disappearing instantly. Immediately after, a feather floated several feet into the air. Runes are magical characters that possess the power to resonate with magic. You could call them pictures of magic. Once written and activated, the target you designate will be affected by the spell. However, it is very rigid. Unlike incantations, it cannot be changed on a whim. If you wish to alter the effect, you must reactivate the rune and rewrite the parameters. A new set of runes was written. The feather that had been floating several feet high slowly lowered its altitude, stopping right in front of Lin. Then, can I try? Lin was genuinely interested in this outdated method of casting. Although it was a bit rigid, it wasn't unusable. You've already learned runes. Professor Flitwick was slightly surprised. Yes, I just casually flipped through them before. I memorized the dictionary of common ancient runes because I needed that knowledge when learning how to make wands. It truly is a pity you didn't join Ravenclaw. When you have time, visit the Ravenclaw library. There are many books in there that would be useful to you, Professor Flitwick said regretfully. He then looked at Lin with encouragement. Now, give it a try. The young wizards next to Lin all turned their heads to watch curiously. This was the first time they realized that Lin was actually not skilled at charms, which was somewhat unexpected. Emulating Professor Flitwick's demonstration, Lin used his wand as a quill and began writing the obscure ancient runes on the parchment. The magical power within him gathered at the tip of his wand under his control, and as he wrote, faint blue glowing script appeared on the parchment. You're using a bit too much magical power, and it's not very evenly distributed. But that's alright, it's only the levitation charm. Your runic script is very standard. Professor Flitwick nodded. For his first time writing a runic spell, Lin's performance was already quite good. Now you can try activating it with your magical power. Target selection is a very important step in rune magic, so concentrate. Understood, Professor. Lin took a deep breath, then steadily touched the runes he had written with the tip of his wand. The runes on the parchment ignited instantly. With a flash of blue light, the power of the levitation charm spread immediately, and gasps echoed through the classroom. Using Lin as the epicenter, an area with a radius of about 5 meters was completely covered by his magic. Tables and chairs floated up, hovering a full foot above the floor. Ha. That's it. Professor Flitwick clapped and laughed. For your very first attempt at casting with runes, I think that was excellent. Practice accurately locking onto your target afterward, and casting spells using this method will pose no problem. However, to master it more deeply, Lin, you still have a long way to go. After speaking, Professor Flitwick waved his wand, and the floating tables and chairs settled back down steadily. It seems all of you just experienced the power of the levitation charm. So, are you finding it easier to get a feel for the spell now? Professor Flitwick looked at the other students in the classroom. Remember, it's swish and flick. Imagine the feeling of gently floating up just now, that will be very helpful. After charms class, Lin followed Professor Flitwick to his office. When he emerged, Lin held a palm-sized notebook. The small book had a dragonhide cover, and its inner pages were not parchment, but soft, pliable sheets made from the leather of a magical creature. The off-white pages were slightly yellowed, looking quite old. According to Professor Flitwick, pages made from the hide of mooncalves and several other magical creatures could allow magically written runes to maintain their form for an hour or two without disintegrating. Such spellbooks were essential casting aids for wizards when traveling, back when charms were not yet popular. However, after wands were invented and charm magic became widespread, spellbooks were quickly phased out. The one in his hand was certainly not an antique from 1,000 years ago, but a replica Professor Flitwick bought when he traveled the world in his youth. Although a replica, its craftsmanship and effectiveness were no worse than the original spellbooks. Nevertheless, spellbooks were a transitional tool. In the era of runic magic, truly skilled casters almost never needed the aid of spellbooks. Using magic to write runes in the air was a very common and practical method, and wands could even provide additional help for this type of casting. The casting gestures for charm magic today are actually simplifications derived from writing runes. The essence of modern charms is the original runic magic. Generally, the birth of a new spell first requires determining the runic combination, then translating the runes into a chant, and finally transforming it into a charm. The current stagnation and slow development of charms are also related to the fact that modern wizards rarely study ancient runes. If they don't even know runes, how can they design their own magic? Slang magic that doesn't require runes does exist, but its effects and power can only be said to be somewhat effective in the hands of its inventor, but if others use it, it's not so reliable. For example, the phrase, pescipixi pesternomi, which will be heard one day in the future, meaning, annoying pixies, get away from me. This spell is a typical example of slang magic. Its inventor could indeed make it effective, but if others used it, the effect would be very uncertain. Compared to standard spells translated from ancient runic programming, slang magic is very unstable. Slang magic is more like a magical dialect, only its inventor can speak it with the right flavor. After getting this item, Lin spent a lot of time studying it, even getting a bit distracted during his afternoon classes. Soon it was the Halloween Eve feast. The Great Hall was newly decorated, with thousands of bats fluttering their wings on the walls and ceiling, forming a huge dark cloud flying over people's heads. This wasn't some bat spirit, but rather Professor McGonagall's masterful transfiguration, and had nothing to do with Snape. Given his current attire, even if Snape were to use his animagus form to transform into a bat, he would definitely be a bat king, the kind whose bite could cause mutations. The golden platters were filled with various delicious foods, and there was also a special Halloween treat, Halloween giblet soup served in pumpkin containers. Blood-red broth floated with vampire kidneys, unblinking eyeballs, and maggot pasta, while raspberry jam, blood vessels, were injected into pink panna cotta. The brain pudding, covered with a sugar film, was both disgusting and delicious. Of course, the bloody severed finger biscuits also tasted great. Setting aside their eye-watering appearance, the strange Halloween foods all tasted good. Hermione, why are you here? Lin, who had sat down and was about to start eating, saw Hermione sitting with Hallie. He instinctively spoke, wondering if Hermione should still be crying in the bathroom stall at this hour. Why can't I be here? Hermione looked at Lin with some confusion. Am I supposed to be scared back to the dormitory by floating pumpkin heads? I don't think pumpkin heads would scare you. Lin glanced at Hermione's plate, which held a half-eaten brain pudding, looking like a zombie nod brain. You have quite the taste. It just doesn't look good, but it tastes great. Why don't you try some, Lin? Maybe, but before I eat brains, I'm going to try this coffin bread. The meat sauce inside smells so good. When not sitting with Ron, Hermione indeed wasn't angered by Ron, who flailed his arms like an ape in class. And with Hallie there, Hermione wasn't someone without friends, she had a good relationship with Hallie and Parvati, her two roommates. The title of Miss Know-It-All wasn't thrust upon her either. In terms of all-around theoretical knowledge, she was still far behind Lin. The difference in reading volume was evident. Even if Lin only took time to read, he could devour almost a brick-thick book in a day, something she couldn't achieve no matter how hard she tried. It was a difference in memory talent. But the joyful Halloween feast was soon interrupted by an uninvited guest. Just as people were excitedly trying the exotic delicacies, the great hall doors were violently pushed open. Quirrell, reeking of garlic, burst into the hall. His large turban was askew on his head, and his face was filled with terror. Disturbed by the commotion, the young wizards stopped their whispers, their gazes falling upon him. Quirrell walked to Dumbledore's spot, leaned against the table, panting heavily, stammering frantically. Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know. With that, he collapsed onto the floor and fainted. Lin was completely unfazed, but countless screams and murmurs erupted in the great hall. Dumbledore had to use his wand to create several firework-like explosions to quell the noise and calm everyone down. Prefects, Dumbledore said gravely, lead your house students back to your dormitories immediately. Upon hearing Dumbledore's words, Lin put down his knife and fork, lowering his voice to Hallie beside him. Hallie, cry. What? You cry first. Lin subtly pinched Hallie's waist. The next second, Hallie was in tears from the pain, looking up with tear-filled eyes. Just then, Snape, who was about to walk towards Quirrell, stopped. His heart felt as if something had squeezed it tightly. What bloody Quirrell? Get out! Get out! Didn't you see Hallie crying? Don't get in my way. Quirrell's face was distorted from being stepped on the back of his head by Snape as a stepping stone, but he had to pretend to be unconscious, otherwise, wouldn't his embarrassment today be for nothing? All right, go back. If Snape asks why you're crying, just say you're afraid of being eaten by a troll. I'm not a coward. Hallie glared at Lynn angrily but then nodded silently, agreeing. But, Lynn, tell me, are you planning something mischievous? The quick-witted Hallie smelled mischief. Although she hadn't been naughty or troublesome until now, some talents, once present, simply exist. I'm helping others. All right, enough talk, I have to go do something important. Professor Quirrell is still waiting for my gift. Quirrell's purpose in coming to Hogwarts was simple, the Philosopher's Stone. Once he got the stone, he would definitely leave Hogwarts and then find an opportunity to resurrect Voldemort. Lynn honestly quite hoped for this. He didn't care if Voldemort lived or not, nor did he care if England was in chaos, but if Quirrell could leave, Lynn would certainly applaud. He was truly sick of that disgusting garlic smell, which made him want to vomit, and classes were a waste of time. Moreover, due to his mediocre talent in charms, he found it difficult to learn advanced spells like the Bubblehead Charm, which could filter odors and toxins and allow one to breathe underwater. Directly confronting this guy would, of course, be an extremely unwise move, so why not give him a gift instead? Quirrell was going to the Chamber of Secrets for the Philosopher's Stone, wasn't he? Then Lynn would create an opportunity for him to go. Snape had been drawn away by Harry, Dumbledore and the other house heads needed to deal with the escaped troll, and Quirrell had been sent to the hospital wing on a stretcher summoned by Madame Pomfrey's wand. He had 100 ways to excuse himself and leave. This was the best time for him to act. Lynn left the Gryffindor group and then went to the 4th floor of the castle, near the entrance to the Philosopher's Stone's chamber. His clairvoyant superpower was enough to let him see everything in that room through obstacles, and his telekinesis could also cover this area. With the ability to teleport at will, Lynn wasn't afraid of being caught. Anti-apparition magic was ineffective against him. Although his teleportation range was only a few kilometers at most, it was silent and left no magical fluctuations. After the young wizards returned to their respective common rooms, Lynn also waited for his target. Without Snape's surveillance, Quirrell indeed found an opportunity to leave. He used magic to conceal his figure, but it was useless. It might fool the portraits in the corridor, but Lynn spotted him instantly. The disillusionment charm blurs the body to blend with the environment, and a powerful disillusionment charm can even achieve an effect similar to optical invisibility. However, people don't just disappear directly. By slightly adjusting the degree of his clairvoyance, Lynn could directly see Quirrell's traces. His superpower clairvoyance was also very subjective. He could penetrate as many layers as he wanted, so there was no terrible experience of seeing internal organs directly with effort and missing the beautiful exterior. A wooden door with a broken lock certainly couldn't stop Quirrell, not even the young wizards in the school. The lock automatically unlocked and fell aside as Quirrell approached, and the wooden door opened at that moment. The hut was dark, and nothing could be seen clearly. Quirrell's footsteps were light as he stepped into the room. Bang tilde. Suddenly, the wooden door behind him closed, and the sound of it closing startled the monster in the room. It was a gigantic dog, almost as large as an adult African elephant when it stood up. 3 identical dog heads opened their eyes at this moment, staring intently at this ill-intentioned intruder. This dog's name was Fluffy. It was a newly adult 3-headed dog, originally from Greece, and was a legendary guardian of the underworld. Although that was a Muggle legend, in the magical world, 3-headed dogs were still very dangerous but also very reliable guardians. Each of its 3 heads had an independent consciousness, allowing them to take turns maintaining vigilance against the outside world 24/7. Their sense of smell, hearing, and sight were all excellent. Their fur could withstand most magic, and their super strong vitality made 3-headed dogs one of the very few creatures that could survive after being hit by the Avada Kedavra curse. 3 heads, 3 hearts, 3 lives, coupled with high resistance to magic, powerful physical strength, and the ability to work tirelessly, made the 3-headed dog an excellent guardian of wealth in the magical world, a rare good dog for guarding homes. The toxins in its teeth could also prevent wounds from healing and mark targets it bit for a long time. Combined with its nose for tracking over long distances, no one would be foolish enough to provoke this thing. But Quirrell had already provoked it. Fluffy let out a low growl, its muscles tensing. In fact, the moment the door behind him closed, Quirrell already wanted to run away, but the door was as if it had been welded to the doorframe. Unless he blew it up, there was no possibility of opening it. Accompanied by a deterrent roar, Fluffy pounced. Instinctively, Quirrell waved his wand, and a spell directly hit Fluffy's massive body. But it had little effect. This was because Quirrell dared not use destructive dark magic or the killing curse within Hogwarts, but ordinary spells were not even a tickle to Fluffy. Fluffy, hit by the spell, only paused slightly. Its innate ferocity was activated. Three-headed dogs were absolutely loyal to their masters, but for this kind of stinking intruder, it would not be polite at all. Three dog heads with bared fangs and sharp teeth attacked directly from the left, right, and center. Quirrell, who only had time to wave his wand and send the middle dog head reeling back, was bitten on the leg by the left and right dog heads. With a violent thrashing from side to side, Quirrell, almost thrown up, let out a scream. The head that had been knocked back and was now a bit dizzy opened its mouth again and bit down from the center without hesitation. Ah ah ah. A heart-wrenching scream echoed in the dim hut. Quirrell, feeling that something in him had probably shattered, almost couldn't hold onto his wand. Idiot. A cold, malicious voice echoed in his mind. Quirrell instantly snapped out of the intense pain. He feared the owner of this voice more than the pain in his body. Fortunately, Fluffy had been instructed by Hagrid not to really bite to kill. After giving the guy a severe lesson, Fluffy, shaking its dog heads, threw Quirrell to the door. Its low growl left no doubt that it would do it again. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door for me. Waving his wand vigorously, Quirrell forcibly tore the door to pieces. He scrambled out of the door, but didn't forget to wave his wand back, repairing the broken wooden door and rehanging the lock. This failure was nothing, but if he were discovered, he wouldn't get another chance. Pulling aside his robes, blood had already seeped through. Jagged dog teeth left a half-circle bite mark on him, almost crushing one of his precious parts, and a severe pain shot through his calf. Quirrell, completely unable to stand, gritted his teeth and waved his wand with difficulty. He summoned a stretcher, laboriously used magic to float himself onto it, then concealed himself with the disillusionment charm, and quietly left. Quirrell, why can't you get your act together? Lynn, watching from the side, was so frustrated he could feel it in his balls. He truly hated Quirrell for not trying harder. Where was the dark magic Voldemort taught you? Why didn't you use it? Aren't Death Eaters able to turn into black mist and float in the sky? Couldn't you have turned into mist and entered the cellar? How could you get bitten by Fluffy and almost torn in half? Show some of the skill you used to blow up Gringotts, for crying out loud. It's like I'm spoon-feeding him, and he still doesn't know how to chew. What a piece of trash. Spitting, Lynn cursed and teleported away. Almost forgot, I haven't picked up this month's props yet. Upon reaching the 8th floor corridor, Lynn turned towards the room of requirement. His busyness lately had almost made him forget to get the props, but luckily it wasn't time for the next refresh yet. Tomorrow was the last day of October. Lynn emerged from the room of requirement with a subtle expression. The gadget he had just received for October was genuinely unexpected. Over the past 3 years, the most technologically advanced item he had acquired was arguably the adaptation light. Even though its effect only lasted half an hour, it was incredibly overpowered. Illuminated by the adaptation light, he could jump into a pool of lava for a bath. No environment could cause him any trouble. While magic might achieve similar results, the complexity and difficulty involved would be far greater. As for other gadgets, such as the bamboo copter, owner sticker, or all-purpose tent, the wizarding world offered plenty of equivalents, and their effects were comparable. Undeniably, in terms of sheer wonder and unscientific nature, Doraemon's secret gadgets were slightly more potent than magic. If magic was a fairy tale brought into reality, then the secret gadgets were fantasy made manifest. He had just obtained such a fantasy-class gadget, and what's more, it was practically brand new, showing almost no signs of use. This was only the second near-mint condition gadget Lin had ever acquired, and it was far more impressive than the bamboo copter. The common room was surprisingly empty. Percy must have shooed all the students back to their dormitories, only allowing those who needed to read or do homework to remain. However, since it was Halloween and the evening's events had occurred, very few people could settle down to study. As he pushed open the dormitory door, the noisy chatter suddenly ceased. Lin, who was in excellent spirits, smiled and greeted his roommates. What were you all talking about that was so lively? Is it possible that you were just arguing? Dean threw himself onto his bed, looking as if he were exhausted from talking. Talking about the troll. Sort of. It started that way, but then it moved on to other things. Seamus, his face slightly flushed, had clearly been irritated. Ron said he hadn't done his potions homework, an essay due tomorrow, and I told him I wouldn't dare let him copy Snape's work, but the guy wouldn't let up. The differentiation and summary of the properties of herbs like asphodel and wolfsbane. Lin paused slightly. Can't you just flip through a book and finish that essay? I know of 4 or 5 books that cover that topic, like 1000 magical herbs and fungi and a directory of common herbs of the swamps and woodlands. This stuff isn't hard, is it? Besides, potions is in the afternoon. If you go to the library after lunch tomorrow, you could finish it in an hour, easily. Well, that's assuming he can actually get motivated and stop being lazy. Seamus huffed angrily. I'm not lending it to him, anyway. I just forgot before. Ron's face was slightly flushed. You just copied it from a book anyway. I'd be looking at the same thing if I went to the library. Then go copy the book yourself, don't bother me. I already let you copy my transfiguration homework, wasn't that enough? Looking at the situation, it seemed they were about to start arguing again. This was the first time such an argument had broken out in the dormitory. Over the past 2 months, whenever Lin returned to the dorm at night, his roommates were usually already asleep. That's not a good habit, Ron. Although Lin didn't particularly enjoy lecturing others, he was in a good mood today. Moreover, he had been meaning to make it up to Ron ever since the incident with the flavor transferring chewing gum. While Ron's own greed was mostly to blame, Lin felt he had been partly careless. After all, you study for yourself. Although everyone gets lazy sometimes, it would be best if you could correct this habit. Ron nodded, pursing his lips. He looked sullen and unhappy, but he didn't argue back. Maybe Ron just forgot earlier, Neville whispered at this moment. He didn't want the atmosphere among his roommates to become too tense. I forget about homework all the time, too. Like last week's charms assignment, I didn't remember I hadn't done it until Seamus asked me about it on the day of the class. I ended up rushing it in the Great Hall. Neville's words earned him a grateful look from Ron. I really did forget. If I hadn't, Snape's homework, you know how it is, right? Once everyone calmed down, Seamus and Dean realized Ron had a point. After all, it was Snape. Nobody wanted to risk losing house points or getting detention or extra labor from that man. Ever since the incident during the second week of term, even the little snakes of Slytherin had settled down. When Snape got angry, he truly didn't hesitate to make an example of them. Everyone has minor flaws, myself included. I have them too. Lin pulled up a chair and sat down, speaking calmly. Identify your shortcomings, correct them, and then become better. I believe that's the way to improve yourself. Although, you're probably thinking, if I had the ability to change, wouldn't I have done it already? When it came to their own flaws, most people were very much aware of them, but knowing them and actually being able to change them were two different matters entirely. Lin, do you have any methods you can teach us? Neville's voice held a hint of longing. My terrible memory always makes me mess things up. If it weren't for your stickers, I'd probably be missing several books right now, having forgotten where I left them. I do have a method, but it's not a complete cure. It can help you make an immediate correction, but the duration is limited. After this help ends, you must rely on your own willpower to persevere until you completely reverse the habit. It's a temporary fix, but it has a limited duration. The 4 roommates gathered around Lin, their eyes shining with curiosity and expectation. After all, they genuinely wanted to change their bad habits. Dong dang dang dang, dang tilde tilde dang dang tilde. Mysterious background music swelled as Lin extended his round hand. The Anytime Graduation Certificate. Lin pulled out the secret gadget he had just acquired today, a genuine, 99% new item that could be used many times. What is that? Is it going to make us graduate from Hogwarts immediately? A confused Dean looked at Lin blankly, unable to figure out what this item had to do with correcting bad habits. What does graduation signify? Leaving school. Seamus ventured. Right, leaving school. But this isn't for graduating from Hogwarts, it's a certificate that allows certain habits to graduate and leave your body. With that, Lin unrolled one end of the scroll, and a piece of paper covered in scribbles slid out. Graduation certificate. This certifies that has graduated from. Those characters are strange. Are they ancient runes? The ones you used in Charms class? Neville, standing next to Lin, peered closely but couldn't make sense of the squiggles. It's Japanese, nothing to do with ancient runes. Lin gave a brief introduction. As long as you write the habit you want to graduate and leave in the blank space, and keep the certificate on you, you will be free from its interference. Whether it's laziness, forgetfulness, carelessness, or anything else, any habit you possess, you can escape its influence. The prerequisite, however, is that you must carry it with you. If it is discarded, torn up, destroyed prematurely, or if the usage time expires, it will become ineffective. The validity period is 1 month. After 1 month, the effect will gradually fade. During this fading period, you must rely on your own willpower to keep going, constantly strengthening your resolve to completely correct the habit. Of course, if you are highly resistant to what you write here, or if you never truly intended to change in the first place, its effect will not fully materialize, and the duration will be shortened. Each person only gets 1 chance. Lin held up a finger. Although this item wasn't strictly limited to 1 use per person, cheap things are often not cherished. Furthermore, Lin wasn't Doraemon, and they weren't Nobita. Lin wasn't stingy about using the gadgets, but he wouldn't use them without restraint either, especially since there was no way to guarantee obtaining specific ones. So, who wants to change something about themselves? His gaze fell upon Neville, who was currently looking at Lin with longing. Neville, what is it you want to change? I want to change the part of me that is so forgetful and always losing things. I promise I'll work hard. Neville's face was flushed, and his eyes were incredibly firm as he spoke. I don't want to cause trouble for my grandmother or for everyone else anymore. If it weren't for Dean, Seamus, and you, Lin, I would definitely have made a fool of myself countless times. Thank you so much for your help before. Sincere thanks are always pleasant. Seamus and Dean chuckled awkwardly. They didn't feel they had done much, only occasionally reminding Neville of things. I believe in you, Neville. Lin nodded. Based on what he knew from his previous life, Neville's forgetfulness wasn't innate. It seemed that Neville, who had been hidden by his parents, had witnessed the entire process of them being tortured into madness. Consequently, he was plagued by nightmares for years afterward. Harry had dreamed of the green light of the killing curse and his mother's screams, but Neville dreamed of the screams of extreme pain caused by the Cruciatus curse, and his nightmares were longer and clearer than Harry's. His grandmother had used a powerful memory charm on him to make him forget that part, allowing him to live a normal life. However, in an effort to erase those terrible memories, the powerful charm had affected Neville, leading to his forgetfulness. Lin had complete confidence that the secret gadget could cure the after effects of magic. Future technology didn't adhere to magical principles, it was the science of the unscientific. After all, future technology was fully compatible with magic. For example, the incredibly powerful magic dictionary, simply writing the magical effect and the corresponding method of use on a blank page allowed one to directly create magic, without needing to worry about magical power or casting proficiency. Even non-owners could use the spells written inside. Lin wrote down on the blank space of the graduation certificate, forgetfulness. He then handed the graduation certificate to Neville, who was standing beside him. Neville's chubby face was tense. He took the certificate with both hands, and his gaze momentarily became sluggish. He froze in place for 2 or 3 seconds before returning to normal. But the next moment, Neville's eyes turned red, and unstoppable tears streamed out. He instantly burst into tears. This unusual reaction made the others nervous, and they quickly asked Neville, "What's wrong, Neville? Why are you crying?" I. Neville shook his head, choking back sobs, and desperately wiped away his tears with the back of his hand. He couldn't utter a complete sentence for a long time. After about 2 or 3 minutes, Neville, whose eyes were red and bloodshot, finally stopped crying. His chubby face was tight, and his teeth were clenched firmly. I just remembered something I will never, ever forget for the rest of my life. The sudden change in Neville made his roommates feel slightly bewildered. They felt as though Neville had become a different person in that moment. His gaze was as firm as a warrior's, and there was fire burning in his eyes. Thank you, Lynn, thank you so much. Neville took a deep breath and thanked Lynn solemnly. I will definitely cherish this opportunity. I absolutely won't be like before, forgetting the things I must remember. This time, I absolutely won't forget. Lynn, who likely guessed what had happened, nodded and smiled, patting Neville on the shoulder. I believe in you. You can definitely do it. Perhaps influenced by Neville, Seamus, Dean, and Ron were all feeling somewhat nervous now. Next up, Seamus. Yes, all right. Seamus nodded and stood rigidly in front of Lynn, as if he were about to face judgment. So, what is it you want to graduate from? Can you make it so that when I cast spells, they don't just randomly explode? Seamus scratched his head sheepishly. The nickname, Gryffindor's Exploding Lad, had spread among the first years. Whether due to a peculiar constitution or some other reason, Seamus always caused explosions when casting spells, leaving himself covered in soot. Do you know why the explosions happen? I asked Professor Flitwick. Seamus chuckled. He said it was because I was too careless and hadn't learned how to control my magic properly. They're too active, so they tend to throw fits. He told me to be more serious and careful when doing things. So, what you want to graduate from is carelessness, right? Yes, I think so. If I were more careful, it shouldn't happen anymore. Seamus nodded. He trusted Professor Flitwick's judgment, and he knew it himself, too. Then, Lynn wrote down on the blank space of the graduation certificate, "Kaiso su carelessness." After receiving the certificate, Seamus's reaction wasn't as dramatic as Neville's. He merely paused for a moment, and then his eyes lit up. Right now I feel like. Seamus began incredulously. I suddenly remembered that when I was writing my assignments before, there were some things I thought of but didn't write down. I'm going to go fill those in right now. What about you, Dean? I want to be more focused, Dean said thoughtfully. I can only concentrate when I'm drawing, at other times, I can't. Dean was quite talented at drawing. He was a West Ham United fan and had even drawn a portrait album of his favorite players from the Premier League, copying them from posters. Sometimes when I'm doing homework or reading, I get distracted and start doing other things. Then, I have to struggle to remember what I was supposed to write or do, which gives me a headache. I wrote my potions assignment in fits and starts, 3 or maybe 5 times. It should have taken half an hour, but it ended up taking most of the day. Then all right, easily distracted. I hope you can maintain this change afterward. Dean nodded decisively, then took the graduation certificate Lynn handed him and carefully put it away. All right, Ron, what do you want to graduate from? Ron fell into deep thought. Ron was trying hard to summarize. Can I write down a few things? Ron asked awkwardly. I feel like I'm quite careless, I can't focus, I always goof off, and I forget things. While it's good that you recognize your shortcomings. Lynn's mouth twitched slightly. What change do you think would help you the most? Ron sank into contemplation again, this time for a little longer than before. After a moment, Ron looked up at Lynn. Why don't you give me a suggestion? But you are the one who needs to change. Advice given by others might not be what you actually want. Lynn didn't want to deal with any after-sales service. Helping people was fine, but being a nanny was not. Therefore, even if he could point Ron in the right direction, he wouldn't give him the answer. Maybe I should be more diligent. Ron tentatively suggested after a moment. I feel like the things in the books aren't hard at all. I could learn them easily if I just studied a bit. It's just that I haven't tried before. If I put in some effort, I'm sure I could master them completely. Yes, master them completely. Ron, suddenly filled with confidence, nodded assertively. I need to be more diligent. Then all right, lack of diligence. But remember, if you want to become a studious and hardworking person, you still have to persist in doing it yourself. I completely understand, Ron declared confidently. Here you go. After taking the graduation certificate and snapping out of his daze, Ron was suddenly filled with drive. He immediately pulled out 1,000 magical herbs and fungi, grabbed his quill and parchment, and began battling his potions assignment with high spirits. By the way, Lynn, did you use it to get rid of one of your own flaws? While Ron was diligently working on his assignment, Seamus and the other two asked Lynn curiously. Me. No, I didn't. Lynn waved his hand. My flaw was being lustful, but later, when I was at Oxford University, too many beautiful older girls took advantage of me. After so many experiences, I became numb to it. They all wanted to smother me in their chests. It was truly excessive, and they made me apply sunscreen for them at pool parties. It was exhausting enough to kill a person. Although I can't imagine that scene. We're so jealous. Exactly. While the instant graduation certificate was indeed very useful, not everyone needed it. The next day, Lynn asked Harry and Cho, but although they were somewhat interested, they both felt they wouldn't really need it. Compared to Lynn's roommates, the two girls were very self-disciplined. They paid attention in class, completed their homework on time, and rarely failed to grasp anything the teachers taught. Their remaining time was spent training for Quidditch or relaxing and chatting with friends. Cho's only slight worry was her lack of skill in transfiguration, but the instant graduation certificate couldn't immediately turn her into a transfiguration prodigy. The item had its limitations. Fortunately, Lynn could help her with this. His current level of transfiguration was already better than that of most fourth-year students. What he lacked was more practice time to digest the theoretical knowledge he had learned through repeated practical application. After Halloween, Hogwarts truly welcomed the snowy winter. However, the snow in early November was light, drizzling and intermittent. If they wanted to happily run outside the castle to play in the snow, they would have to wait until December. According to Cho, around Christmas, the snow outside Hogwarts could be several feet deep, and the Black Lake would be completely frozen, allowing many students to go ice skating on it after class. They had to be wary of the giant squid in the Black Lake. Although it was generally friendly to students, it sometimes played pranks, like suddenly knocking hard on the thick ice layer with a tentacle, making the skating young wizards lose their balance and fall. It would also occasionally break the ice cap in the middle of the lake and float on the water to bask in the sun when it wasn't snowing. However, fishing in the Black Lake was not recommended because the merpeople could sometimes be quite petty. When you excitedly pulled up your rod, the fish you caught might only be half a severed body. Generally speaking, although the merpeople were a bit unsightly, their attitude toward Hogwarts students was acceptable, neutral leaning toward friendly. They wouldn't harm young wizards swimming or diving in the Black Lake, but they also didn't actively seek contact with people. The day after the Halloween feast, Hogwarts welcomed the weekend. As the light snow fell, Lynn received a short message from Hagrid inviting them to his hut. Cho, hold off on lunch for a bit. Lynn and Harry approached the Ravenclaw table and found Cho. What's up? Hagrid finished making our cloaks. He wrote to us asking us to go over and try them on. Will they be the sparkly gold kind? Cho was quite happy to hear the news. Although Hagrid was huge and looked a little intimidating, once you interacted with him, you could truly feel that he was a very kind and enthusiastic person. Should we take him a gift? Cho hesitated, unsure what kind of gift would be best to bring Hagrid. Don't worry, I've prepared everything for you. Although Hagrid lives in a hut, he doesn't really lack anything. However, Hagrid has two major passions. One is raising cute little creatures, and dragons, and the second is drinking heavily and eating large amounts of meat. I ordered something a couple of days ago, and it was just delivered last night. The timing is perfect today. What is it? Harry asked curiously. Did you manage to get Hagrid a baby dragon, or a dragon egg? I thought about it, but dragon eggs are regulated and can't be bought through normal channels. However, dragon meat can be. Dragon meat is edible. Harry's eyes lit up. She had developed a bit of a foodie streak. Although she didn't eat much, she liked to try everything. Don't worry. This is Ancestor's Choice, fireball dragon meat imported from the East. It costs 14 sickles per kilogram, which is about the same price as beef sold in Muggle supermarkets, but you certainly can't buy this in the Muggle world. I bought several cuts. We can roast it, use it for hot pot, or stew it. I also got a piece of dragon liver, which would be perfect for pan frying. I have to thank Fred and George for this. They told me that Cedric's dad works at the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. So, I asked Cedric, wrote a letter to his father, and found out where to buy it. While Diagon Alley sells various dragon parts, they don't sell fireball dragon meat. I bought 400 kilograms. Even Hagrid will have enough to eat well for a whole week. Lynn had spent all the galleons he had confiscated from that unfortunate dark merchant on this purchase. Since I bought so much this time, I invited a few extra people, and Hagrid agreed. He should be busy setting up a bonfire outside his hut right now, so let's skip lunch in the Great Hall. Then Marietta should come too. Cho naturally didn't forget her best friend. She took 2 steps forward, whispered a few words in Marietta's ear, and the 2 girls stood up arm in arm, following Lynn. By the time they reached the Great Hall doors, the others Lynn had invited had arrived, Hermione and Parvati, who were good friends with Harry, along with Parvati's sister Padma, Lynn's 4 roommates, plus Fred, George, and Cedric. Cedric was invited to thank him for his help, as Lynn wouldn't have gotten the meat otherwise. As for the others, Lynn really wasn't concerned about other matters. Wasn't he a handsome young man himself? Inviting wolves, inviting vampires into the house. No need to worry. With Quirrell around, vampires would smell him and run 10 kilometers away. Everyone's here. Let's go. Hagrid should have the bonfire ready. Lynn pushed open the small door of Hogwarts Castle, and the group filed out. The footprints of the dozen or so people left a long trail on the snow-dusted lawn. Even before reaching Hagrid's hut, they could see a blazing bonfire flickering brightly against the snowy world. The flames were immense. Hagrid had probably used magical wood for the fire again. Lynn wondered if Ollivander would slap his thigh and cry out in waste upon seeing this sight. Giant logs, thick enough for 2 people to embrace, had been chopped into large chunks of firewood, and Hagrid's busy figure grew larger in their view. I've got everything ready, just waiting for you all to arrive. From a distance, Hagrid's booming, powerful voice rang out. He waved his large arms, his hairy face beaming with smiles. This was the first time so many people had come to visit him, and Hagrid was in high spirits. Everyone come closer, it's warm by the fire. Beside the roaring bonfire, a long wooden table held piles of raw meat. The marinated dragon meat had been diced or sliced, and the savory aroma of the stewing meat in the large pot could no longer be contained by the lid, rapidly spreading outward with the white steam. French red wine stewed dragon meat. The house elves started working on it this morning, stewing it for the whole morning. Hagrid chuckled happily. They were a great help, but I didn't want to take up too much of their time, since the house elves still have to prepare breakfast and lunch for you all. I think it will be ready soon. I just checked, and the sauce isn't quite thick enough yet. No problem. We can skewer the meat now, and later we can have some teppanyaki and charcoal grilled skewers. Lynn motioned for his friends to sit down, then smiled and addressed the boys. How about we handle this part of the job together? What about us? Harry raised her hand. Can I grill the meat? I've wanted to try it for ages. Of course. Lynn brought out the portable kitchen and unfolded it. It will remind you to flip the meat before it burns. Don't underestimate me, Lynn. I'll help too. Cho said enthusiastically. I can pan fry steaks. It would be even better if you said you could make braised pork belly. Come to my house for Christmas. How about I ask my mom to make it for you? Hong Kong style braised pork belly. Cho winked playfully. Just call me Big Sister, and I'll take you home for Christmas. That's a great deal, isn't it? Dream on. A handsome guy like me charges an appearance fee, unless your cat can do a backflip. The girls burst into laughter, then joined Harry in examining the portable kitchen. The spacious countertop gave them plenty of room to work. Skewering the meat wasn't difficult work. Putting on gloves, the boys quickly got to work while chatting. They could sandwich vegetables between the meat chunks. Hagrid had prepared bell peppers, onions, cherry tomatoes, and unpeeled garlic cloves. The aroma of the charcoal grilled skewers soon drifted over. Although the girls, who were doing this for the first time, were a bit flustered. The futuristic portable kitchen not only absorbed smoke but also had mechanical arms to help process ingredients, keeping everything orderly. You have to hand it to Lynn, Fred sighed admiringly. George picked up the thread, speaking with excitement. This is our third year at Hogwarts, but this is the first time we've been on a picnic with so many girls. I kind of regret not inviting Angelina. How come I didn't know you had a thing with Angelina? Fred, spill the beans. George put Fred in a headlock and said menacingly, we're twins. How dare you keep secrets from me? Because you, George, you idiot, don't know how to flirt. I liked her since I joined the team last year, you stupid little brother. Well, I know how now. When we get back, I'm going to try to charm Lee's sister. Lee Jordan was the twins' other good friend, but if he heard about this, George would surely be chased for miles. Hey, Lynn. George, releasing Fred's neck, asked gossiping, you said last time that Harry wasn't your girlfriend, so what about Cho? Cho. Lynn turned his head to look at Cho, who was chatting with the other girls and pan-frying dragon steaks in front of the kitchen setup. From this angle, she truly looked like a little chef. I saw someone sneaking out shoulder to shoulder after dinner for what looked like a date. Don't tell me that doesn't count. Fred raised an eyebrow. Boys this age loved talking about this kind of thing. They were exactly at the age where their romantic feelings were starting to bloom. Then you might be disappointed, Lynn shrugged. Cho and I are really not dating. To be honest, I haven't even thought about the whole romance thing. It's too much trouble. Besides, I prefer big chests and long legs. Lynn's surprisingly frank answer shut down Fred's questioning immediately. Beside them, Cedric glanced at the girls working nearby. To be fair, Cho certainly fit his aesthetic preferences, but if she already had a boyfriend, Cedric wouldn't interfere. Although he was only in his third year, Cedric was extremely popular in Hufflepuff, thanks to his outstanding looks and excellent grades. In all his dealings, Cedric was considered a graceful and charming gentleman. But just as he looked up, Cedric's eyes widened slightly. He quickly cleared his throat, then looked pointedly at Lynn and gave him a meaningful glance. Although Lynn saw Cedric's signal, he didn't immediately understand. After all, this was only their second meeting, and they weren't exactly close. But less than 2 seconds later, Lynn understood exactly what it meant. Someone had placed a plate of grilled skewers in front of him. A faint scent of grapefruit and jasmine, which belonged to Cho, drifted into his nose. So you like big chests and long legs, huh? Cho pressed down on Lynn's shoulder. The girl's seemingly gentle voice didn't sound nearly as soft or warm as it should have. How big is big? And how long is long? Lynn tilted his head up slightly, meeting Cho's eyes. Perhaps, you have great potential. I'll give you one more chance to phrase that properly, Lynn. Cho, whose face was slightly flushed, squeezed Lynn's shoulder tighter. The voice ringing in his ear this time subtly carried a hint of murderous intent. They said we were dating. Lynn pointed, instantly throwing Fred and George under the bus. But I said no, because both you and I are too young right now. We don't even know what love is or what true affection feels like. Cho paused slightly upon hearing this, and her grip loosened. I'm waiting for you to grow up. Then you can tell me yourself. This made the tips of Cho's ears turn slightly red, and her voice dropped low. Who asked you to wait? So, it's a deal. HMPH tilde you shameless boy. Cho rolled her eyes dismissively. In that case, can I crash at your place for dinner over Christmas? Cho pressed down harder on Lynn's shoulder. She paused, then said, actually, my cat really can do a backflip. With that, Cho tossed her hair and walked away, her profile faintly red. Come on, try some, Lynn said, pushing the plate of grilled meat toward them. Taste the girl's handiwork. You just. Cedric looked bewildered, he suddenly felt like he wasn't very hungry anymore. Oh, handsome boys are generally easier to forgive. Actually, Cedric, you must have the same talent. Hufflepuff has plenty of good-looking girls. They haven't chased you. I don't believe it. Cedric quickly waved his hands in denial, and the teasing laughter spread around them. The sumptuous dragon meat feast left everyone's mouths watering. The roasted dragon meat was springy and tender, the stewed meat was soft and flavorful, and the thinly sliced pieces, briefly boiled, were slightly crisp. The fireball dragon meat, delicious no matter how it was prepared, received unanimous praise. The most astonishing dish was the dragon liver. Compared to foie gras, dragon liver was less greasy but equally delicate on the palate, carrying a unique exotic fragrance. Simply pan-fried with a sprinkle of fine salt, it was a supreme delicacy. This reminded him of the osmanthus cicadas he had eaten in his previous life. He wondered if he would ever get a chance to try some again. Over an hour later, the friends left, satisfied, but Lynn and the two girls stayed behind. Hagrid led them into his hut, then unfolded a fur cloak made from rheum hide. The golden fur was used for the lining, while the outer side was made of a soft, smooth fabric. It felt somewhat like silk but lacked the sheen, resembling a matte black color. At first glance, it looked ordinary, but it was actually extremely luxurious and warm. The thread used for the stitching alone was worth hundreds of galleons if unraveled, as every strand was spun from unicorn hair. The stitches on the cloak were not particularly fine, but they were very strong. Hagrid had clearly put his heart into making it. Although this kind of manual labor wasn't difficult for him. He had made the leather coat he was wearing himself. It still gave the surprising impression of a giant doing needlework. Hagrid, you're the best. Harry, having put on the cloak, stepped forward and hugged Hagrid's arm. Even standing straight, she didn't come up higher than his knee, so she had to hug his forearm instead. I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you like it. Hagrid chuckled happily and gently patted Harry's hair. I don't even know how to thank you, Hagrid. Compared to Harry, Cho seemed more embarrassed at the moment. No need to thank me, don't be silly. Just take them. You're all good kids. If we really want to thank Hagrid, why don't we find a chance to set him up with a girlfriend? Lynn had no embarrassment whatsoever. He really liked the cloak Hagrid gave him, and he stored that kindness in his heart. Find Hagrid a girlfriend. Cho blinked, slightly surprised. Isn't Hagrid married? I thought. Hagrid lives much longer than ordinary wizards. If you calculate his age based on a normal human lifespan, Hagrid is probably only in his 20s right now. Oh. Is that true? Harry looked up at Hagrid curiously, but Hagrid wasn't entirely sure himself. I'm actually half giant. My mum was a giant. Hagrid didn't hide his heritage, but he didn't usually talk about it either. However, the three kids in front of him made him happy, so he decided to tell them. Giants do live a long time, maybe 3 or 4 times the lifespan of a wizard. The longest living giant lived for over 700 years, and ordinary giants can live close to 500 years, but generally, giants rarely die of old age. Lynn added, giants frequently engage in internal conflict, fighting over territory or mating rights. Elderly giants are usually driven out of the tribe. The longest living giant was a rarity. A giant wizard or tribal shaman with considerable magical talent. Only such wise figures are still cared for by the entire tribe in their old age. Hagrid is actually very exceptional. He possesses the immense physical strength of a giant and also has magical talent, which is extremely rare among half-giants. I heard that the headmistress of Beauxbaton's academy, Madame Maxime, is also a tall woman. Hagrid, have you ever met her? The Beauxbaton's headmistress. Hagrid frowned slightly. The time before last that the Triwizard Tournament was held at Hogwarts, I remember the Beauxbaton's headmaster was a short man, a friend of Professor Flitwick, who liked to wear colorful clothes. I truly don't know the person you're talking about. But I'm not as great as you say. Hagrid smiled sheepishly, dropping the subject. I hadn't even finished my 3rd year when I was. Hagrid abruptly cut himself off. Expelled. But, how could the school? A flash of surprise crossed Harry's face, but she immediately understood. Something must have happened back then, right? They misunderstood you, Hagrid. You absolutely couldn't be a bad person, so they must have wrongly accused you. Thank you, Harry. Hagrid was deeply touched by this unquestioning trust, and his eyes grew slightly moist. This deep grievance had been hidden in his heart, unspoken to anyone, and whenever he remembered it, Hagrid couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Maybe we can help. Cho also realized there was definitely something suspicious going on, and she was willing to believe that the gentle half-giant before them was not a bad person. It's all in the past now. That was 50 years ago. Hagrid waved his hand. Just let it go. I'm doing quite well now, aren't I? All right, kids. Hagrid, not wanting to involve them in the ancient matter, stood up. I have to patrol the forest soon, and you all should head back to the castle. Oh, There's one more thing I almost forgot. Hagrid slapped his forehead, reached up, and took down a bag hanging from a hook on the ceiling. He pulled out a large handful of unicorn hair. Is this enough for you, Lynn? As for magical wood, the firewood pile outside is full of it. Just pick what you like. Come get more when you run out. The forest is full of the stuff, feel free to take whatever you need for your experiments. There. Hagrid crumpled the large handful of unicorn hair into a ball and shoved it into Lynn's hand. I need to go patrol the forest now. The three, having been ushered out by Hagrid, looked back at his hut every few steps. Lynn, there's definitely something wrong here, isn't there? Harry's small face was serious now. We absolutely must figure out what happened and get justice for Hagrid. Yes, exactly. Hagrid must have been deeply wronged. Cho nodded in agreement, echoing, you'll help, right, Lynn? Of course. Hagrid has helped me far too much. He deserves it. Lynn nodded, taking the matter to heart. Maybe we can come visit him more often and talk to him, and perhaps we can learn more about what happened. But not right now. Don't rush it. Come on, girls. It's quite cold outside. I'll walk you back. In the next instant, the three figures vanished from the spot, reappearing one after another outside the entrance to the room of requirement on the 8th floor. Quirrell took a leave of absence, citing that he was so terrified after encountering the troll that day that he trembled when he walked and was unable to teach. This was definitely good news for the young wizards. After all, whether they were first years or 7th years, anyone who had attended Quirrell's class was allergic to the pungent garlic smell that stubbornly lingered in the classroom. This almost toxic substance tormented everyone's nerves, challenging the limits of their physiological adaptability. There was a method to covering up Voldemort's rotten, foul smell with garlic. Unlike getting used to the stench of a toilet when squatting, this stuff was too potent to adapt to. The brain twitched wildly in refusal, and human adaptability was utterly defeated in Quirrell's presence. Lynn could easily conclude that the reason the resurrected Voldemort would have no nose in the future was certainly because his nose had been suffocated and ruined by being muffled inside Quirrell's turban while possessing him. But don't celebrate too soon. Just as the young wizards learned that they wouldn't have to attend Quirrell's defense against the dark arts class, Professor Snape, a good teacher of the people, willing to dedicate himself to Hogwarts and to the academic success of the young wizards, stepped forward. Why does Snape have time to teach defense against the dark arts as a part-time job? After seeing the notice on the common room bulletin board, the frantic young wizards shrieked. Probably because of love. The twins, who were experts in unconventional knowledge, grumbled with long faces. Snape has been eyeing the defense against the dark arts position for a long time. But that means double the points deducted. The twins wailed, covering their faces and weeping, Gryffindor is finished. Completely finished. Maybe Snape isn't that bad, maybe I can even get some points. What? After hearing the familiar voice of their younger brother, Fred and George twisted their necks lightning fast, staring at Ron with an astonished look, as if to say, this must be the first time we've met today. Are you running a fever? He must be delirious. Maybe it's a lingering effect from last time. We should send Ron to St. Mungo's. The twins spoke in quick succession, so seamlessly that it sounded like one person talking. I'm not the same as before. Ron said proudly, lifting his chin slightly. Because I've started working hard. You just wait and see. Well, good luck. And our condolences. The twins didn't take him seriously at all. They knew their brother's temperament better than anyone. Saying he only worked for 3 days and then slacked off for 2 was an understatement. Saying he had a 3-minute passion was also underestimating him. 15 minutes of hot-blooded enthusiasm would be more accurate, and no more than that. Days passed, and although they hadn't asked students from other grades how Snape's defense against the dark arts class was, the hourglass in the Great Hall faithfully reflected everything. You are the worst batch of students I have ever taught. And that's not just limited to potions class. As soon as the first-year defense against the dark arts class began, Snape coldly dropped this statement. To reduce class time, Snape's substitute defense against the dark arts classes were taught to all 4 houses together. In the large classroom, Snape's gaze swept coldly over the crowd. More than 2/3 of the class submitted a pile of nonsense for the idiotic assignment Quirrell gave you. I don't care how you learned before, But now, in my class, you had better listen carefully and diligently complete the assignments I give you. The opening intimidation made the young wizards shiver. Although the defense against the dark arts classroom was on the third floor of the castle, much brighter than the dungeons, the air in the classroom was freezing, probably because it was already winter and snowing, making everyone shiver. Defense against the dark arts, as the name suggests, is a course that teaches how to protect oneself from dark magic. Of course, it also includes some dark creatures and their magic. Unlike wizards, many magical creatures are born knowing how to use some magic, especially those lurking in shadowy corners. They might take your life without you even knowing it. This voice, barely louder than a whisper, made the young wizard's hair stand on end. They kept feeling as if something was secretly watching them from behind the curtains or under the tables, eyeing which piece of flesh was the most tender with ill intent. Perhaps in this classroom, Snape, resembling a bat with his robes spread, was the largest dark creature of all. Now, who can tell me, what is dark magic? Magic cast using curses is a medium, and requiring the wizard to provide malicious emotions. Lin raised his hand, tentatively speaking. He was actually quite puzzled. He had read so many books, but not a single one accurately defined what dark magic was. None of those books provided a clear framework for identifying dark magic. It seems your reputation for not being good at charms is well deserved, Snape said sharply, staring into Lin's eyes. A curse is merely a method used to construct a spell, and emotion can only enhance magic, not affect whether the magic is cast. The kindest, most benevolent person in the world can still take a life with the killing curse, and a villain with an evil heart can also conjure a Patronus. As long as there's enough magic, the spell will work. Dark magic is not magic that merely exists on the surface of a spell. But you got one thing right. All magic considered dark magic must possess one characteristic. Snape tapped the blackboard, and a line of text appeared. The malice of harming others or other life. Emotion is an amplifier for spells. The emotions and feelings a wizard injects into magic will affect the final outcome of a spell. When magic is insufficient, strong emotions can make the magic you cast stronger. However, not every spell can be enhanced by emotion without limit. Without exception, the spells currently recognized as dark magic all have a far greater advantage in this regard than other spells. For example, the 3 unforgivable curses. The malice of killing other life, the malice of controlling others' freedom, and the malice of enjoying tormenting others. These 3 extreme emotions are the 3 most needed forms of malice for the killing curse, the imperious curse, and the cruciatus curse, the 3 unforgivable curses. Perhaps you might think that you are only first-year wizards, and these spells are too profound for you. But I must tell you that when you encounter wizards who harbor ill will towards you, they won't care if you understand these spells, it's enough if they do. This is not alarmist talk. Across the sea in America, wizards die inexplicably every day. Hogwarts protects you too well, because Hogwarts has too many magical protections for you. At Ilvermorny, however, there is not the same foundation as Hogwarts. The most recent murder targeting an underage wizard was just 15 months ago. Snape curled his lips into a chilling smile. But you won't stay in school forever, and you cannot pray that every wizard you meet outside of school will be a good person. Dark wizards don't write, "I am a dark wizard," on their faces. Perhaps they even seem friendly and gentle, a good person. What should you do if you suddenly encounter such a person? Should you throw a punch, scream, or draw your wand? And this is what I'm going to teach you. To teach you what to do after drawing your wand to prevent the danger you are about to face. Everyone's attention was deeply captivated by Snape at this moment. His words, his voice, sounded chilling, yet what he spoke about ignited endless curiosity in the young wizards. Snape was not comparable to Quirrell, who was determined to play the role of a useless teacher. Snape had a deep understanding of the dark arts. Although his most outstanding talent was in potions, you couldn't question a Snape who had developed the Sectum Sempra spell while still a student. What I want to warn you is that no matter what year you are in, or if you have graduated from Hogwarts, when you encounter a threat outside, the best way is not to fight that person, but to create an opportunity to escape, or to seek the help of an Auror. Although the Ministry of Magic is full of good-for-nothings and idiots, at least the Aurors are relatively reliable. Especially before you graduate from school and learn apparition, seeking their help is the most effective course of action. So now, may I assume that each of you has mastered the first spell Professor Flitwick taught you after coming to Hogwarts? Draw your wands. As soon as Snape finished speaking, the young wizards hastily drew their wands. Lumos, I don't need to teach you a second time, do I? The students nodded messily, and the classroom was filled with a mix of incantations. The tip of everyone's wand lit up, though the brightness varied, but they had all learned how to use it. After all, it was the simplest and most basic spell. Now then, Nox. With a wave of Snape's wand, all the lights in the classroom extinguished. Since you have only just begun to learn magic, using advanced spells is impossible for you, but spells derived from the Lumos charm can buy you precious time to escape or call for help. It might only be a few seconds, but it's crucial. As Snape raised his right hand and waved it lightly, black mist appeared in the classroom, and the light from outside the window was swallowed by darkness. The pitch-black classroom made everyone uneasy. I will demonstrate for you once. Snape's voice silenced the commotion that had just risen in the classroom, and tension once again took over. This is a flash magic more powerful than Lumos Maxima. Lumos Fulgor, a burst of bright light. Like the first light when heaven and earth were created, an extremely dazzling ball of light erupted in the darkness. The black mist that covered people's eyes was shattered and dispelled by this strong light, and the blinding flash left a bright spot on their retinas. This is the most basic usage. The instantaneous blinding light can temporarily blind someone for a few seconds, several minutes, or even cause permanent blindness if they can't find a healer. However, don't daydream about unleashing the full power of this magic. Even after you graduate, almost no one will be able to do it. Of course, if any of you have a talent for charms that I haven't discovered, then you might be able to do what I do. A magnificent white light reappeared in the dark classroom, but this time it wasn't a fleeting flash explosion. Instead, it transformed into a beam of light that truly split the heavens and earth. The smell of burning wood soon drifted through the air. The black mist disappeared, and the sunlight from outside streamed back into the classroom. Near the window, a wooden dummy target continuously emitted thin wisps of smoke, its front showing scorch marks from high heat, with black carbonization covering its chest area. Even the most basic Lumos charm has enough power to kill, provided your mastery of the spell is strong enough and you have enough magical power. The classroom was silent, but the excitement in the young wizard's eyes was almost overflowing. They didn't whisper or chatter amongst themselves, simply because Snape possessed enough authority to make them control their emotions. He was the most unapproachable professor at Hogwarts, unless someone wanted to experience what it felt like to wish they were dead. Now, you should master the techniques of how to seek help from an aura, or immediately distance yourselves from danger. Put away your wands and get out your parchment to take notes. Snape's class was orderly. Compared to Potion's class, Snape teaching defense against the dark arts was clearly more popular with the young wizards. This was probably because Snape genuinely liked this subject, and also, Snape wanted to teach practical skills that someone in the class might very well need. In Snape's eyes, Harry needed to master this knowledge, even setting aside her identity as the girl who lived. Such a pretty and lovely girl would easily be targeted by ill-intentioned people outside. Snape couldn't rely on Muggles to protect her safety, all he could do was help Harry grow stronger herself. After all, he had promised Dumbledore not to follow Harry, not to disturb her life. In fact, Snape even had a slight idea of making Lynn her bodyguard or something, but unfortunately, Lynn's talent in charms was quite ordinary, even considered subpar in his eyes. It took him a whole day to master a very basic small spell, and a week to practice that spell to a barely usable level, which Snape secretly looked down upon. Once the lesson moved into the explanation and practical application stages, Snape reverted to his usual stern and strict self. The young wizards, who had only been happy for a short while, once again experienced Snape's venomous, stepmother-like sharp tongue. The scathing remarks that sprang from his mouth were both tricky and precise, hitting straight to the point. Weasley. I told you to practice magic, not to impersonate an ape waving a stick. Ron, who was diligently practicing magic with a smug look on his face, froze in terror. Today, he had uncharacteristically sat in the front row, right behind Harry. The moment his wand brushed Harry's hair, Snape's gaze fell upon him. Get out and stand. Don't disturb other students. Gryffindor, 5 points from Gryffindor. Ron, Pale-faced, shakily stood up, wanting to explain but not daring to. When I said Weasley, did I not mean you? After scolding Ron, Snape's gaze swept across the room and accurately found Draco Malfoy in the crowd. Get out and stand, Malfoy. But, Professor, Draco, who felt he hadn't done anything, was dumbfounded. His detention had only ended a few days ago. What sin had he committed? Slytherin, 5 points from Slytherin. Draco, looking utterly miserable, drooped his eyebrows and followed Ron's footsteps to stand in the corridor as punishment. Actually, hard work and good grades aren't always directly correlated. When you work hard in the wrong direction, the more effort you put in, the more likely you are to fail. Take stock trading, for example, most of the time, the harder a leak tries, the more often they get cut. Tuition fees are endless. Ron, who had just paid a round of tuition to Snape, was having an existential crisis. He didn't snap out of it until the class ended and they headed to the Great Hall for dinner. Well, isn't it our little Ronnie? How many points did you add in Snape's class? The twins immediately perked up when they saw Ron looking so dazed. They flanked him, one on each side, their expressions feigning seriousness. You couldn't have lost points, could you? Though we wouldn't be surprised if you did. Go away. Go away. Ron irritably shook his shoulders, dislodging the twins' hands from his shoulders, then sullenly grabbed a chicken leg and began eating with both hands. I clearly tried my best. Ron mumbled indistinctly, speaking to himself in words only he could hear. It must be Snape, it must be him. He just can't stand Gryffindors, can't stand me. Lumos. I can use it without learning, what's so hard about it? Temporary setbacks didn't break Ron. After getting rid of not trying hard enough, he became more diligent in all aspects than before, which, of course, included striving to be an excellent student valued and praised by professors. Unlike Ron, the other three who received the graduation certificates didn't feel compelled to perform exceptionally well in front of the professors. They simply saw significant improvements in their academic lives after breaking their bad habits. Seamus, no longer careless, stopped causing accidental explosions in class, and Dean was always able to focus on studying and completing his assignments, leading to noticeable improvements in his grades. But the person who changed the most was definitely Neville. The previously muddled little chubby boy was, one could say, a new person after that day. Neville no longer misplaced things or forgot what he'd just heard in class. Neville's parents were excellent elite Aurors at the Ministry of Magic. Although the Longbottom family wasn't obsessed with pure blood status, their family's excellent bloodline was indeed inherited by Neville. After all, in the original timeline, after the main trio left Hogwarts, Neville carried the banner of Dumbledore's army, fighting against the Death Eaters at Hogwarts. He perfected the Room of Requirements' vulnerabilities, re-establishing it as Dumbledore's army's headquarters. Drawing the sword of Gryffindor to sever Nagini's head was his moment of glory, but what was truly admirable was his brave act of standing up against evil after growing up. True courage lies in stepping forward when one knows there are difficulties ahead, and when one knows it's an impossible task. And at this moment, Neville had a clear and definite goal. He wanted to become someone his parents would be proud of. He wanted to learn more knowledge and magic, hoping to pull his mom and dad out of the abyss in the future. He was a boy, yes, but he was already several steps ahead of many, striding towards becoming a responsible man. His extremely high talent in herbology, previously hidden and unrevealed, was now noticed. Even in charms and transfiguration classes, Neville performed quite well. Snape, who once saw him only capable of brewing potions into a paste, now passed by Neville without stopping or deducting points, which was the most practical praise for his current progress. In the cold November, someone lit a small torch for Gryffindor, adding a few more scarlet gems to the hourglass. But it was also at this time, after 10 weeks of training, that the Quidditch season began. The biting cold wind couldn't dampen the enthusiasm of the young wizards. In the days leading up to the match, whether in the Great Hall or the common rooms, people were talking about the first match of the year, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. This was a rivalry between sworn enemies. The two rival houses were always at odds, both in the classroom and on the field. Slytherin, known for its dirty tricks, always played the hardest against Gryffindor. Ambushing people in sacks, putting laxatives in drinks, and deliberately provoking trouble in the corridors, these things happened every year. But this year, Slytherin had changed slightly. Snape had finally fulfilled the responsibility of a normal teacher, strictly forbidding such despicable behavior. This good deed earned cheers and applause from the young wizards of the other houses, and Snape's reputation soared during this time. Plus, Professor Quirrell would return to teach defense against the dark arts in December, and the young wizards, who had already absorbed a lot of practical knowledge, honestly felt a bit reluctant to see him go. "Don't be nervous, Hallie, you're the pride of Gryffindor." The night before the match, Wood cheered Hallie on in the common room. "Just play as you do in practice, and we'll definitely win this Quidditch opener." "I'm not nervous, Wood, except for it being a bit cold." Hallie had a hint of embarrassment on her face. Wood was being a bit too overly excited at the moment. "If you keep talking so loudly, I'll actually feel a bit pressured, everyone's watching." Is that so?" Wood scratched his head awkwardly. "Ahaha, maybe I'm just a bit too excited." "We'll be cheering for you." The students in the common room shouted loudly at Wood, "Beat those Slytherin fools. Don't let them score a single goal." Amidst the cheers and encouragement, Hallie tugged at Lynn, who was curled up in an armchair reading. "I'm suddenly a bit nervous. If I don't play well tomorrow, will I become the sinner of Gryffindor?" "You don't have to worry about that." Lynn closed the book in his hand and turned to Hallie. "Everyone is very tolerant and understanding of you. No one will blame you for losing the game." "Oh, I see, because good-looking people are always more easily forgiven, right?" Hallie used Lynn's previous excuse, learning as she spoke, "I do seem to be quite good-looking." "Then you should thank your mom for being good-looking. If you were like your dad, you'd be doomed." Hallie stuck out her tongue. "It seems my dad really wasn't very popular. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon both hated him, and it seems Professor Snape did too, but I don't know what terrible things he did. I asked Hagrid before, but Hagrid only said, James liked to play pranks on people, and I don't know anything else." "So you want to know?" "A little, I'm still very curious." Hallie nodded, looking eagerly at Lynn, but the guy just stopped talking after he said that, putting on a profound air of mystery. Lynn. Please Tilda. No pouting, I can't handle that." Lynn, with one hand pressed on Hallie's forehead, suppressed her mischievous attempt. "Wait a few days, I'll research some good methods." "All right Tilda, but what book are you reading?" "The 1990 new edition of Quidditch Rules. I'm the commentator tomorrow, isn't that a bit of a surprise?" "Hee, I knew you were the best, Lynn." Hallie, suddenly at ease, patted her chest. "I'll definitely win tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, and all respected professors, welcome to the Hogwarts House Cup. Today marks the first match of the school year, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin. I apologize, but your good friend Lee Jordan will not be commentating today. He went diving for fish in the Black Lake, had his first kiss stolen by a Black Lake mermaid, and the resulting mental trauma has rendered him unfit for duty. I am your new friend, Lynn, and I thank Professor McGonagall for giving me this opportunity. I will be providing the live commentary for this match." Lynn, sitting in the commentator's box, showed no stage fright. However, when he mentioned Jordan having his first kiss stolen by a Black Lake mermaid, a dark-skinned boy in the stands nearby waved his fists in protest. He was wearing a large scarf, and the mouth hidden beneath it was swollen like a sausage. The truth was, this wasn't because Jordan had kissed a mermaid, rather, he had bet a classmate that Black Lake merpeople's teeth were poisonous. While fishing, he caught a fish that had been bitten in half, and after sampling the fresh sashimi, he had successfully poisoned himself. And now, entering the pitch, is the Gryffindor team. Since Charlie graduated, Wood has used his sharp insight to find a genius seeker to strengthen the Gryffindor team. This marks the first time a first-year student has been recruited early to a house Quidditch team. Let's give a round of cheers and applause to Harry, and wish her a spectacular performance. Next up is the Slytherin house team. Compared to Gryffindor, their members are much more burly, especially their captain, Marcus, whose massive arms look almost as thick as his head. But why is Marcus's head so pointy? If I recall correctly, Quidditch matches banned troll hybrid wizards back in 1770. The match between the Ogre Oddballs and the Hyman Rapid Vipers was a complete disaster. At the opening whistle, members of the Rapid Vipers had their heads flattened by the Ogre Oddballs using chest muscle charges, resulting in 4 serious injuries and 2 deaths. I sincerely hope such a tragedy won't be repeated today. Lynn, focus on the match, Professor McGonagall reminded him with a cough from the side. Yes, Professor. Lynn replied instantly. Now, Madam Hooch is confirming that both teams are ready. She's pulled out her silver whistle, and the match is about to begin. As Madam Hooch pointed her wand at the chest of balls, the first golden blur to shoot out was the golden snitch. Immediately after, the bludgers rocketed into the air, beginning to circle and accelerate, and the largest quaffle also rose vertically. A loud whistle blew, the match began. Gryffindor has possession. Angelina Johnson has the quaffle, and the Slytherin chasers are closing in, trying to use their physical advantage to steal it. Pass. Katie Bell has the quaffle, but she's in an awkward position. The Slytherin beater has gained control of a bludger. Can George, who is closest, intercept him? Lynn spoke incredibly fast, yet his diction was perfectly clear. Only seconds into the opening exchange, the audience's excitement was already ramped up by his rapid-fire commentary. George was shoved aside, but he managed to knock the bludger off course with his back, buying Katie precious time. But Marcus, watch him. I have a feeling he's going to foul. A straight-on charge. Like a rampaging bull, Katie pulled up sharply. She almost went down, but Alicia Spinnet has the quaffle. All 3 Gryffindor girls are doing brilliantly. Perhaps Wood factored in the girls' superior physical agility. Slytherin's defensive ring has been broken. Can Terrence Higgs block the shot? He's bulky enough to cover the entire hoop. Look at Fred. He smashed a bludger, hitting the beater, Cassius Warrington, who was trying to interfere with the goal. George has already anticipated the bludger's follow-up trajectory. The keeper should watch out for his big backside. A perfect bludger combination. The Slytherin keeper deflected the bludger attack with his enormous backside, but Alicia shoots and scores. Gryffindor takes the lead, 10 points. Ding tilde. Lynn hit the scoreboard counter. 10-0, Gryffindor leading. Slytherin now has possession. Lynn's style was a complete departure from Lee Jordan's, offering almost minute-by-minute factual commentary. Professor McGonagall nodded in satisfaction nearby. If she hadn't known how busy Lynn usually was, she would seriously consider making him the permanent match commentator. Slytherin's counterattack was equally fierce. The Gryffindor team, which favored dexterity and agility, found themselves at a disadvantage defensively. The physical disparity made it difficult for the 3 female chasers to effectively interfere with the aggressively charging Slytherin players. The pressure on Fred and George suddenly increased, and Wood, guarding the hoops, became Gryffindor's last line of defense. A spectacular dive. Wood nearly flew off his broom, but he made the save. Possession returns to Gryffindor, but Fred is in trouble. Marcus just swung his broom into Fred's back, nearly knocking him down. Slytherin has regained control of the bludger, and Katie is in danger. She's being cornered. Bludger. The bludger, powerfully struck by the Slytherin beater, flew straight toward Katie's back. Her space to dodge left or right was completely blocked, as 2 Slytherin chasers had her sandwiched between them. Katie, her face pale, heard the rushing wind behind her. Left with no choice, she dropped the quaffle, immediately pushed her broom down hard, plummeting toward the pitch below at a near 90-degree angle. She then executed a desperate sideways pull-up, narrowly escaping disaster by grazing the bunting beneath the viewing stands. But the bludger aimed at her back did not follow suit. Perhaps the Slytherin beater was in exceptional form today, because the bludger continued straight ahead. The young wizards in the stands gasped and immediately ducked, covering their heads as the bludger skimmed past the stands, narrowly missing their scalps. Right in its trajectory, a figure wearing a large scarf, panic flashing across his face, subconsciously tried to duck as well. However, Quirrell's turban was too large, causing him to lose his balance while trying to duck quickly. Quirrell, who simultaneously felt as if someone had pushed him from behind, stumbled and tilted his body, exposing the back of his large head directly in the bludger's flight path. Quirrell, whose face had only shown slight panic moments before, now turned deathly pale. It was fine if he got hit, but the master could not be injured. He kicked off his feet and lunged forward with all his might, but fatefully, the bludger curved and began to ascend. Quirrell, unable to change his posture in midair, intercepted the bludger. The back of his head significantly caved in. The force of the ball was monstrous. His intended lunge transformed into a high-difficulty front flip. The massive impact to the back of his head caused Quirrell to stumble and stand still after completing a 270-degree forward rotation. His head was ringing, but surprisingly, the back of his skull didn't hurt. Perhaps the turban is quite thick. The moment this thought flashed through his mind, a hysterical scream echoing inside his head caused Quirrell's already pale face to completely drain of color. Voldemort was such a good master, who cared for his subordinates that he couldn't even bring himself to open his mouth and curse Quirrell furiously. Perhaps because it was the first Quidditch match he had watched in decades, an overly excited Voldemort went completely silent after that one loud scream. "Professor, are you all right?" The young wizards sitting near Quirrell were astonished by his impromptu front flip, but also worried about his physical state. Quirrell was already bad enough. If his brain were damaged and he became even worse, that would truly be terrifying. "I'm fine, fine. I'm quite all right, all right." Quirrell waved his hands, stuttering, and walked frantically toward the exit. I just need a moment to calm down. He stumbled away, looking distraught and utterly lost. Lynn withdrew his gaze with some regret. He had underestimated the buffering capabilities of the Voldemort brand cushion. After attending Snape's class, he simply couldn't tolerate the idea of Quirrell returning to the classroom. The force of that bludger, amplified by telekinesis, had been strong enough to shatter a person's skull, yet it had still failed. What a truly legendary unkillable king. I underestimated you, Voldemort. The Quidditch match was over. Harry lived up to expectations by catching the golden snitch, and Gryffindor won with a score of 450 to 360. In direct confrontation, although the all-male Slytherin team was slightly rougher in technique, their physical advantage allowed them to take the lead in goal scoring. 3 girls against 3 strong men was still too difficult, and if the match had been prolonged, Gryffindor's chances of winning would have further decreased. This is why professional Quidditch matches are almost exclusively played by men. Although there are all-female Quidditch teams, their rankings in international leagues are generally low. The most formidable among them, the Holyhead Harpies, has yet to win a league championship. The Gryffindor students were immersed in the joy of winning the Quidditch match. Lynn paid out of pocket to buy some butterbeer from the 3 broomsticks, a non-alcoholic beverage deeply loved by the young wizards. Compared to the lively scene in the Gryffindor common room, inside the locked defense against the dark arts office on the 3rd floor of the castle, Quirrell was practically in tears. He had placed 2 mirrors, one in front and one behind him, so he could easily see what had happened to the back of his head. After unwrapping his turban, a protruding face had appeared on the back of his head, making his skull nearly 1.5 times the size of a normal person's. But now, that protruding, twisted face was only twisted. A large indentation had appeared there, forming a rounded pit. Embedded at the bottom of the pit was an abstract, deformed face. Voldemort's eyes were tightly shut, and no matter how Quirrell called out, he would not wake up. This momentarily gave Quirrell the feeling that the master might be a little dead. His panic held a hint of sadness, and his sadness contained a touch of relief. If Voldemort truly died like this, it might not necessarily be a bad thing for him. Although the power Voldemort promised him was the fundamental reason for Quirrell's downfall, the terrifying feeling of watching his life force drain away after Voldemort possessed him made Quirrell feel a surge of regret and fear. Quirrell was not Barty Crouch Jr., nor was he Bellatrix Lestrange. He lacked the loyalty and madness to sacrifice everything, including his life, for Voldemort's cause. He merely coveted the knowledge and power Voldemort promised. Voldemort had guaranteed his safety after the deed was done, but now, Quirrell wasn't so sure about that promise. What was stuck to the back of his head was the sunken Dark Lord. Voldemort had been lying there and had sunk in. He had been unconscious for so long without waking up and even looked a bit like he was bursting. That shouldn't be my brain matter, right? Quirrell suddenly shivered. Just as this thought crossed his mind, he saw in the mirror that the eyes of the sunken, bursting face twitched slightly. A voice laced with venom spat out from the lips twisted into a thin line. Quirrell. Voldemort called his servant's name. Master, it's wonderful that you're all right. Whether from excitement or terror, Quirrell spoke through tears, I thought you wouldn't come back. Yes, I almost didn't come back. Voldemort's voice was hoarse and low, tinged with death. Perhaps you should explain to me why you went to the Quidditch pitch. Why did that cursed bludger hit me? It was because. Quirrell's legs trembled and gave out, dropping him to his knees. I just wanted to confirm that Harry, yes, Harry. Suddenly grasping at a lifeline, Quirrell spoke rapidly. Master, didn't you suspect her identity before? That boy, no, that girl, what exactly is her identity? But no one has seen if she has that scar on her forehead. I didn't have a chance, but perhaps on the pitch, she was flying on her broomstick, I mean. Enough. Fool. Voldemort roared in anger. He had been concerned about this girl named Potter, but he believed it was merely a coincidence. The Potter family wasn't necessarily wiped out. There were so many people named Weasley in the wizarding world, so why couldn't there be a girl named Potter? The prophecy spoke of a boy, and when he was preparing to kill the boy from the prophecy, he had personally heard the woman shout, Harry, not Harry. Voldemort was certain he hadn't misheard. Is clarifying such irrelevant matters what you should be doing right now? Voldemort spoke weakly, grinding his teeth, getting the Philosopher's Stone as the key. While I still have a little strength, go and retrieve it to make me a new body. You must be tired of having me stuck to you, aren't you? How could I be? It is my honor, Master. Quirrell stammered, completely unable to voice his true feelings. Lying. Voldemort whispered, which only intensified Quirrell's fear. Go and deal with that dog, find a way past it. The Philosopher's Stone, that is your target, and only that. Once you retrieve the stone and create a new body for me, I will fulfill my promise and reward you with knowledge and power beyond your wildest imagination. Now, go brew a potion. I need to rest. Listen carefully. Quirrell paid rapt attention, noting down the potion recipe without daring to show any slackness. After hearing the ingredients for the potion, Quirrell couldn't help but tremble again. Unicorn blood. As an outstanding Ravenclaw graduate, Quirrell possessed an extreme thirst for knowledge. He traveled the world, even willingly becoming Voldemort's lackey, all to satisfy his increasingly inflated, greedy desire for knowledge. Individuals like this pop up in Ravenclaw every so often. Among the Ravenclaw graduates currently serving time in Azkaban, 9 out of 10 broke taboos for similar reasons. Quirrell naturally knew about unicorns. These sacred creatures are magical beings favored by magic. They can bestow blessings, but they can also bring terrible curses. Poachers who targeted unicorns didn't seek their blood, but rather their horns and hides. When killing them, they had to take extra care never to touch the unicorn's blood. Anyone who became tainted by this cursed blood would almost certainly not live for more than a year, facing a miserable death as their inevitable end. Materials obtained by killing unicorns were excellent ingredients for crafting dark arts objects, vicious, powerful, and filled with corrupting energy. Dark wizards greatly coveted them. Hogwarts certainly had many unicorns. In fact, it would be difficult to find another place in Europe where more unicorns lived. Quirrell knew very well that he could not gain a unicorn's acceptance to obtain blood free of the curse. His only way to get the blood was through theft, or even by killing a unicorn. Can the master really save me from the unicorn's curse? Quirrell thought anxiously, highly hesitant about taking this action. Yet, he dared not truly defy Voldemort's command. He had invested too much sunk cost. Quirrell had no choice but to continue down this dark path. Lin tilde lin tilde lin tilde tilde tilde. On a snowy afternoon, Harry, who had gone to the room of requirement after class to watch the snow, grabbed Lin's hand and swung it back and forth. Her little mouth was slightly pouted, and she clung to Lin's side, unwilling to let go. Just think of something, please. Please, please, please Tilda. The pleading voice made Cho, who was sitting nearby, feel a bit soft. She stopped eating the snacks on the small table and looked at Lin, who was sitting opposite her, her gaze flitting between his face and Harry's. Your surgery was really quite successful. Lin's mouth twitched a few times. It could only be said that Harry was now very accustomed to and skilled at using her beauty as a weapon. Compared to her small fists, which still hurt a bit when she hit someone, this soft, slightly cloying voice was indeed quite damaging. If Lin were truly a boy almost 12 years old, he would definitely not be able to withstand this offensive. I am trying to think of something, but it's Snape, after all. He's not easy to deal with. Then hurry up and think. Please, please Tilda. Let go of my hand first. Your steel plate is digging into me. Then I'll give you Cho. Just come back tonight. As soon as she finished speaking, Harry rolled up her sleeves and unleashed the Dragon King's divine power. Don't be fooled by her seemingly fair and tender arms, they were definitely not 100% pure fat, soft and jelly-like. On the contrary, when she exerted force, her arms had lines like those carved into white marble, gentle yet still exuding a beauty of strength. Ah! Harry, stop messing around. Cho, who was subdued by Harry in a few moves and then directly picked up like a gift, was a little flustered. This was the first time she had experienced such overwhelming girlfriend power. Stop, 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 stop. Lynn, feeling a headache, quickly spoke, I'll think of something for you right now. They say the smaller a woman's chest, the more troublesome she is. Sure enough, those like you, with 2 screws embedded in a steel plate, are the most troublesome kind. I'll grow up too. When I become a beautiful girl with big breasts and long legs, Lynn, you'll have to see if I'm in a good mood to even stick to me. I swear I'll never stick to you. Just looking at you makes my head hurt. What about a JK miniskirt and a bandage? Harry let go of Cho and placed her next to Lynn, raising an eyebrow at him. Lynn suddenly looked up. When did you peek at my erotic manga? It was on the train. Didn't Cho and I stay in the tent for a long time? We found it under your pillow. Lynn, with a slightly strained expression, recalled that when they both came out of the tent, their faces seemed quite red, but Lynn had thought it was from soaking in the hot spring, never thinking of this. If you soak in a hot spring for too long, your skin will get wrinkled. How could you soak for over an hour? Harry, guessing what Lynn was thinking, smiled triumphantly, but Cho and I love to read them too. Do you have any others? If you want to see them, wear them yourself and look in the mirror. Lynn rolled his eyes and reached into his 4th-dimensional pocket. The only method I can think of, this might be useful. Lynn pulled out a familiar-looking flashlight. This is a phantascope. Any memories you recall in your mind, or any scenes you make up, can be projected with this. However, made-up scenes might appear distorted and skip frames. As for memories, even if you don't remember them very clearly yourself, they can still be projected. It's a bit like a pensieve, but more convenient to use. I don't know what a pensieve is, but this thing looks very interesting. Harry looked at the flashlight with sparkling eyes. But how do you use this? Harry, who had sat down next to Lynn, hugging her knees, tilted her head and examined it. Lynn, try using it. Huh. Lynn paused slightly, then, after a moment of hesitation, said, it's not impossible. Do you want to see my previous wandering diary? A white cloth was pulled taut by Lynn's telekinesis, floating before them like a movie screen. Then the lights in the room dimmed, and the room of requirement switched to indoor mode. No, that kind of thing isn't interesting, right, Cho? Harry chuckled. Let's see what kind of pretty girls Lynn likes. Oh, there are many of those. Lynn pressed the button on the phantascope, and a girl in ancient attire, ethereal and graceful, appeared on the screen. Wow, her clothes are so pretty. Who is she? Who is she? She's old Lou. Ah no, actually, she's even younger than me now. After all, she's an immortal fairy, so of course she's pretty. But this doesn't seem to be the type you mentioned, with big breasts and long legs, right? Harry squinted, smiling like Anya. After all, she's an immortal fairy. I have a filter in my mind for her. You wouldn't understand. Lynn waved his hand. If you don't believe me, keep watching. As a social butterfly who woke up to find 99+ notifications on VX every time, Lynn was never short of various selfies from girls eager to entice him to go out. Although they used beauty filters, edited photos, and added special effects. But those who weren't good looking couldn't even add him as a friend. Harry had a feast for her eyes as a succession of romantic older sisters appeared before her, broadening her horizons. Why are there sweaters like this, with clothes only in the front, but completely open in the back? Because they look good, I guess. Lynn shrugged. This trend from the 21st century was still a bit too advanced for people of this era. I kind of want to buy one, tilde. Harry reached out and wiped her drool. You can't wear it, don't even think about it. But I can have someone who can wear it show it to me, tilde. Tilde good idea. Lin nodded in agreement, I was thinking the same thing. Cho, who was being stared at by both of them, hugged herself, her face flushed. Cho still needs a few more years. Not now. Lin withdrew his gaze without a hint of regret. Yes, it's too early for Cho to wear it now. Harry also nodded in agreement. You too. Cho, annoyed, grabbed a cushion and whacked them, making them cower and run away. Lin, are there more? Are there more? I want to see pretty older sisters. You'll get aesthetically fatigued if you see too many. How about you check this out? With that, Lin grinned mischievously and projected a new photo. Does he look good? Lin turned to Harry. He looks good. Very loud. He's a man, a pure man. Harry froze in place, her eyes full of bewilderment. But it's okay, Harry. This is England. Liking men isn't illegal. Britain has its own national conditions, as long as you don't set your sights on me. You're ugly. Harry pushed Lin, snorted, and took the phantascope from Lin's hand. I wouldn't look twice at someone who looks like you. Now I'm going to Professor Snape. He'll definitely agree to me. Harry bounced out of the tent, wrapped herself in her cloak, and quickly scurried away. I feel like I should follow her. Lin hesitated for a moment, then said to Cho, I'm a little worried Snape might suddenly lose control. Lose control of what? Cho looked at Lin confusedly, not quite understanding what he was saying. It's getting dark. A professor and a cute female student watching a movie together, it's a bit inappropriate, isn't it? It seems, that's indeed the case. Cho, somewhat understanding, picked up a cloak nearby and handed it to Lin. Let's go, Harry will run too far away soon. No rush, I'll take you back to the common room first. Snape was feeling restless, he had a persistent feeling that something was about to happen. Maybe something good, maybe something bad. He felt slightly irritated and slowly paced his office. At the same time, he began reflecting on recent events, Quirrell, for instance. That man's intentions were impure. Dumbledore had discussed it with him, but even without the conversation, Snape could sense that something was wrong with Quirrell. Unless Dumbledore was a complete idiot, it would be utterly foolish to allow a man who stammered, trembled, and who anyone could see was mentally deficient, to become a professor at Hogwarts. Yet Quirrell was here. Surely Dumbledore wasn't truly a hopeless fool and imbecile. Just as Snape was about to brew a calming potion before bed, a knock sounded at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Who would be looking for him? Snape frowned slightly, walked to the door, and pulled it open just wide enough for one person. Harriet. Snape's voice held a hint of surprise and pleasure, but behind Harriet stood an obstructive figure. Is there something you didn't understand in class? Snape looked into Harriet's eyes and asked in a gentle tone. It's about something very important, Professor Snape. Harriet's gaze held a hint of pleading, prompting Snape to gently open the door wider and step aside. Come in. You can ask me anything. See, Lin. I told you Professor Snape would agree. Harriet, her voice filled with happiness, stepped briskly into Snape's office. Lin closed the door behind them, and they sat down in the armchairs Snape had conjured with a wave of his hand. The thing is, Professor Snape. Harriet looked at Snape, her eyes shining. I've always wanted to know what my mum and dad were really like. Although Hagrid gave me a photo, I still don't know anything about them. Professor, weren't you a good friend of my mother's? I was wondering if I could ask you to let me see them. Lin has a small device that can project memories, like this. Harriet pressed the switch on the illusion lamp, and the wall ahead displayed the first-person view of her catching the golden snitch during the previous Quidditch match. As long as you recall the memory, it can be projected directly. It doesn't even matter if you don't remember it clearly. Snape looked at the strange device in Harriet's hand and fell silent for a moment. Although this device, similar in function to a pensieve, was new to him, it didn't greatly surprise Snape. The magical world held too many secrets, and powerful alchemical artifacts were countless. While he didn't know where Lin had acquired it, it didn't matter. Seeing Snape didn't respond, Harriet waited a moment before asking softly, is it not possible? Her voice pulled Snape out of his contemplation. He paused slightly, then nodded. Yes, it is. That's wonderful. Professor Snape, you're so kind. Looking at Harriet's joyous face, even Snape's hardened heart found it difficult to utter the word, No. He silently reached out and took the small device, which was very easy to use and required no study. Snape, however, seemed somewhat nervous, perhaps wondering where the memory projection should begin. A moment later, a clear image was projected onto the blank wall. The first thing they saw were two red-haired girls. The slightly taller one had lighter hair, while the younger one had deep red hair. It was a rare, bright, sunny day, and as a gentle breeze blew, the deep red strands floating in the air shone a brilliant golden red in the sunlight. Just like Aunt Petunia said. Harriet murmured. Mum's hair is a beautiful golden red in the sun. It's gorgeous. In this moment, Snape's claim that he had known Lily before coming to Hogwarts was confirmed as true. But soon, Harriet frowned and looked at Snape with displeasure. She said, "Professor Snape, what you did was wrong." After seeing the memory of Snape's first encounter with her mother and aunt, Harriet was upset. You shouldn't have played tricks on Aunt Petunia. Even if she couldn't do magic or become a witch, you shouldn't have spoken like that and made the branch fall. And you definitely shouldn't have spied on Aunt Petunia's letter. That was very bad. Snape was momentarily speechless, but finally, he nodded and admitted his mistake. Yes, I did make many mistakes in the past. I may not be as good as you thought. I did a lot of wrong things when I was young. Snape didn't want to lie to Harriet. Although he knew that telling her these things might give her a bad impression of him, he did it anyway. But everyone makes mistakes. I also did some things that made Aunt Petunia very unhappy before. Harriet lowered her head slightly, speaking partly to herself and partly as if to comfort Snape. This familiar understanding and gentleness made Snape pause, and his sense of guilt intensified slightly. My first encounter with your father was on the train. Snape was silent for a moment, and the projected image changed again. The scene shifted to September 1st, the start of term, with the Hogwarts Express steam engine filled with young wizards. Snape searched for a certain figure on the train, finally stopping in front of a compartment where 3 people were seated. Lily was sitting by the window. She glanced at Snape when he entered but immediately turned away. She had been crying because Petunia had discovered her letter had been spied upon back on the platform, and they had argued. I don't want to talk to you, Lily said tearfully. Why? Petunia hates me, because we looked at the letter Dumbledore sent her. So what? Snape's response was poor. Lily gave him a look of disgust. She's my sister. She's just a. Snape stopped himself. Fortunately, Lily had been too busy wiping her tears to hear him. But we're leaving. Even though the first-person view didn't show Snape's expression, his joy could be guessed. That's right. We're off to Hogwarts. This cheered Lily up somewhat. Her yearning for magic currently outweighed her other thoughts. Lily nodded, wiped her tears, and couldn't help but smile slightly. You'd better be in Slytherin. Snape stared at Lily, hoping for her agreement. Just then, another voice interjected, speaking with a touch of mockery, Slytherin. Thanks for watching.